The changes that climate models predict are increased atmospheric CO2 levels that will trap more solar heat in the atmosphere, the greenhouse effect. The Earth will warm further and result in accelerating melting of polar and glacial ice, droughts, and increased localized severe weather events. In this day and age of instant communication and rapid global event reporting, many people come to the conclusion that extreme weather events are up, as is their intensity, which has been predicted by computer simulations of climate change. If you were to do a bit of research, however, you might be surprised to discover that localized extreme weather events like hurricanes and tornadoes have decreased over the last several decades when compared to earlier parts of the 20th century. Also based upon a modest amount of research, you might also be surprised to discover that polar ice volumes have decreased a very small amount when considering the Arctic and the Antarctic together, as the former is losing ice and the latter gaining. Ocean levels are also increasing and have been doing so since reliable measurements began in the 1870s. However, this change may be accelerating. You might also be curious to note that while global average temperatures have increased about 1.1 Celsius over the last 100 years, about half of that temperature increase has occurred prior to the 1950s, which is when human-based CO2 emissions accelerated. And even though there certainly have been more warmer years since the 1970s than prior, based on the same sample set, the last 17 years have seen no increase in the average global temperature. Yet, the number of droughts very recently seems to be on the rise. One final complication of the science is that at most times in Earth's history, especially the last 600,000 years, as temperatures have gone up, CO2 increases lagged by hundreds of years, seeming to indicate increased temperature is the cause of increased CO2, not the effect. So clearly, our Earth's climate is a very complicated matter. Combining the information just described with the significant role energy has and continues to play in the human experience, it follows that many countries, especially those whose economies are closely tied to energy production, and many individuals, especially those whose livelihoods are dependent upon the fossil fuel industry, are really unsure what to make of the headlines and words some of our leaders are using. These include climate crisis, humanity is in peril, climate change is an existential threat to humanity, and no fossil fuel is a good source of fuel. I believe the vast majority of employees working in the fossil fuel-driven energy economy think about how they might continue to make a contribution to our current modern lifestyle and a future that ensures their kids inherit a world that was better than the one before, not how they might destroy the world we live in. At the same time, however, the farmer in California, faced with crippling droughts and the resultant loss of his or her farm, is also wondering what to make of the situation they find themselves in and the role climate change has. Additionally, some coastal inhabitants of our Earth are also concerned with where their home in the future will be if ocean levels continue to rise. So to these individuals, the risks seem very real and present. The principles of how humans adapt to change are pretty well understood. Human nature being what it is, we are generally very slow to change. That is, until faced with a crisis. We then have tremendous adaptation skills. We adapt quickly to change if we believe the house is on fire, so to speak. So it is not surprising that the number of pronouncements of the dire consequences of a continue to do what we are doing scenario has reached a crescendo from many media, government, and even spiritual leaders. Currently, with 1.3 billion people still living in extreme poverty, 1 billion of those children, an estimated 1.6 billion people still without the basic conveniences that electricity offers, and another 2 billion still seeking to achieve a basic level of human existence with a proper bed to sleep in, proper daily nutrition, and water every day. or the estimated 9.6 billion people that will likely be inhabiting our Earth by 2050, that will need to be fed, watered, housed, transported, and come with a desire for a better way of life than their parents had. The focus on eliminating our primary sources of energy that power our modern life seems contrary to what is needed: more energy. The immediate challenges of a world without the many benefits that fossil fuels offer would extend far beyond current perceived and yet to be validated climate inconveniences and difficulties, most of those based upon where we have chosen to settle our populations. Imagine the crisis that would occur if we stopped using fossil fuels tomorrow. We would no longer have trucks bringing food to our stores, no electricity to light our houses and the myriad of electronic conveniences we enjoy today, and the knowledge they connect us to. Our furnaces would no longer work to heat our homes, nor would we have fresh running water in our taps. So certainly, the impacts to our lives would be broad and severe, and could also include mass civil unrest, economic collapse, and the end of modern civilization as we know it. Is it really possible for us to immediately stop the use of all fossil fuels and go back to a pre-modern era way of life? So the crisis argument can be created and debated both ways: a drive to a new and not understood future with no fossil fuels, or to a modified but better understood balance of energy sources. It is perhaps time for all to move forward together in a reasonable, thoughtful, and well-planned way.